It has a big leaf. It requires a big twig to hold up the weight of that big leaf. No, the leaf is twice compound. The buds are sunken down in the tissue right here, kind of peculiar. If you look at it really close, it may look like the rear image of a house cat, but right there, that's sunken down in there is a bud. And in spring, it will erupt out of that twig and form a new branch. Sometimes the buds can have a little flexible stalk between they and the twig, so you can take the bud and wiggle it back and forth. These buds are stalked. In the case of alders, see there's a little stalk right there. And sometimes the buds are stacked on top of each other. These are hickory and walnut. See, there's two buds, one above the other. One there, one there. There's actually three of them there. 1, 2, 1, 2. These are called superposed because they're superposed above the other. That only works with lateral buds. You can't have superposed terminal buds. You can only have one terminal bud. But if the buds are superposed, that's a pretty good clue. It isolates a lot of particular plants. Not every walnut or hickory twig will illustrate a superposed bud, but if you look closely and see any, that helps you determine what that plant may be, because again, there's only a few that have that. Also, the buds can be collateral, side by side for each node. See, this is red maple. It has a flower bud, a vegetative or leaf bud, and another flower bud, so there's like three right side by side. Okay, and then look at this one, it's got both. Okay, it's got superposed buds and collateral buds all in one. This is spice bush. Here's one that's got collateral buds. This one has collateral buds and another pair that's superposed above the other one. This was the last leaf scar. So there's all kind of diverse mixtures of how buds are arranged on the twig, and all of that helps you identify. You just have to look at them and you'll get the image in your head. Oh, I've seen that before. There's only one plant that can look like that around here that's native. That'd be the spice bush. Okay, flower buds. Okay, here's an example of a different kind of twigs. First of all, at the tip of the twig, notice that's smaller than this one, because remember, if the bud near the tip of the twig is smaller than the other laterals, usually means that it's probably not a true bud, and that's true. This is a willow twig. There's a branch stub, the last lateral bud. But as you go down, you have these larger lateral buds. These are flower buds. They have the catkins of the willow. This is an elm. Again, the big flower bud here, here, and here, and that branch stub, pseudo-terminal bud there. And this is a pawpaw. It does have a true terminal bud. It's larger, feather-like, but these are flower buds. And of course, flower buds are only born on plants mature enough to bloom. So you won't find them on little juvenile plants usually. Here's an example of a difference between a vegetative and a flower bud on rose bay rhododendron. You can tell if your rhododendrons or azaleas are going to bloom next year in the winter by seeing how many flower buds it has, because it doesn't produce flowers except through these large, egg-shaped terminal flower buds. These are just going to produce leaves and extension of the shoot. Same thing for a mountain laurel. These are flower buds, and this is just a leaf bud. It just will produce an elongation of the shoot only. Each one of these will enlarge and produce a cluster of flowers. Mountain laurel. Magnolia. In magnolias, if that terminal bud has a swelling, noticeable swelling in the middle, that's a flower bud. Here's an example of an azalea. Leaf bud, flower bud. You notice the difference in size. Usually flower bud, of course, is larger. Here's another type of flower bud that you see in the birch family. They look like little sausages hanging on the tree in the wintertime. This is an alder. You see this also in birches. These are the male staminate flowers. They release pollen. They hang down in the spring when the birches, hazelnuts, alders come out, and the catkins elongate and release the pollen. and they're there usually all winter. As a matter of fact, these produce some of the good food in late winter for birds like grouse and turkey. They will actually eat the catkin buds. Here's birch on the left, alder on the right. Now some catkin buds don't actually, they aren't pendant or hang down, they stick up. This is in case of Leitneria. You can actually tell the sex of the Leitneria or Florida corkwood shrub by the type of buds it has in the wintertime. This is a female and this is a male. The male has the larger catkin buds, the female has the smaller flower buds here. And here's another example of, here's a witch hazel. These are flower buds. And this is, again, this is one twig right here. This is the twig, and this is the branchlet and the branch. Anybody recognize that one? You've seen dogwood, yeah. Flower bud, leaf bud. And this is flower bud. Tiny little leaf buds on the mountain sweet bells. Used to be Leucothea recurva, now it's Eubotris. It's an ericaceous plant. Okay, back to looking at the buds themselves a little closer. There's a thing called naked buds. That means buds that do not have a covering of scales over them. And they're kind of like modified leaves. They serve to protect the embryonic meristematic tissues in the bud in the wintertime, so they overlap the bud. But in some plants, it looks like a little folded leaf that's covered in fuzz or wool, like a feather-like appearance. That's termed naked buds. And then you can have buds that are one scale. They're covered with one single cap-like scale, like in sycamore, willow, and magnolia. These buds, they're not leaf. You can tell there's something protecting the bud, but there's only one. If you split that and peel it off, there's only one scale that envelops and covers that bud. That's called a one-scale bud. Two scale or valvate, two scales come together like cupping your hand over the tip of the terminal bud. In case of yellow poplar here, or viburnums, see that little seam running up? That's a two scale or valvate bud. And then you have some these terminal buds again. Example covered with several overlapping scales. Imbricate means overlapping, like shingles on a roof. Hickory, there's 1, 2, 3 scales visible there. Buckeye has several, they're in opposite pairs. Oak, they're a little obscure because they're small. This is cottonwood, but you can see the bud has several visible scales that compose are the overlapping protection mechanism for it. And how about leaf arrangement? You can't tell what kind of leaves a tree has in the winter, but you can certainly tell how it was arranged. There's 3 important differences in leaf arrangement in woody plants. And this is of profound importance in helping to decide what you're looking at. First of all, the most common is alternate arrangement. See, there's a bud here, a bud and node there, and here it alternates up the stem. If they're two opposite one another on opposite sides of the stem, it's called, of course, opposite leaf arrangement. That's the second most common leaf arrangement. This third one over here called whorled, where there are 3 leaf scars, 3 buds per node. That's kind of rare. That's in catalpa and buttonbush. Not many other plants have whorled arrangements. Occasionally you can find an opposite leaf plant that has a whorled arrangement on a really vigorous juvenile shoot, like in privet. And then sometimes you find it kind of in between. You can't decide, well, is it opposite or alternate? Here's alternate, here's almost opposite. It's called subopposite. And that's just kind of an oddball arrangement certain plants like amorphas will do into confusion. I used to teach in pre-ID class to students at Haywood Tech, inevitably someone would bring in an ash twig that had alternate. Well, it's just never say always in nature. Never say ash is always opposite leaves. Usually is the most typically used word in botany. plant usually or typically does this or usually does that, but you never say always. Here's an example of a magnolia twig. It's got alternate arrangement, but you'll see these weird swellings in certain species of magnolia. Remember, when this bud starts growing in the spring, the first thing that happens is single bud scale peels off. You'll have one leaf come out. It'll grow just a little bit, and then it'll have another bud scale. Each time it grows, it puts out one leaf, and there's a little stipule that causes this ring-like scar. But this cluster of leaves that come out first makes it look like it's maybe whorled or something. But these aren't exactly opposite one another. They're offset just a little bit. So that's an alternate arrangement, but they're clustered in one spot. And that occurs in the spring. So again, this is 1 year's growth. That's the twig of this Fraser magnolia. Last year it did the same thing. It started here, cluster of leaves, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it formed a bud. It didn't grow as much this year. It only produced like 1, 2, 3 leaves and stopped. So you can age these, as far as you can count back, see it, you can age a tree's growth. You know, this is 1 year, 2 years, and it goes on as long as you can see these breaks in the growth pattern. Leaf scars. This is another important thing, and we'll be looking at that outside. When a leaf falls from a twig, it leaves a scar behind. Okay? And it depends on how big the leaf is what kind of scar it makes. It takes you notice from left to right, the size of the twig gets larger, and also the leaf scars get larger. It's just a matter of physics. It takes a larger twig to hold up more weight. So consequently, if the leaves are big, the twigs on the tree are also going to be large to hold that leaf up, whether it's a big simple leaf, if it's a compound leaf. This, like in Stewartia, has a small, simple leaf. The petiole is skinny. It has a very small leaf scar. This is hydrangea. It has a bit larger leaves. This leaf scar is kind of like a half moon turned on its side. In case of ash, it's kind of a shield-shaped leaf scar. It's deep. It has a notch kind of on the top. Ash has a compound leaf, and the leaf scar is deep because it holds up, the weight of that compound leaf. And this is hickory. Again, this is where the bud scales fell away. It started off in the spring with a few big leaves, and then it elongated. But the hickory leaf is also compound like the ash. Sometimes they're kind of big, so it takes a hefty petiole to hold that up. So the leaf scars are kind of big. Later on, leaves further on the twig may be a bit smaller, so the leaf scars are a bit smaller. This is a circular leaf scar, like in the case of Pacolet. Its petiole bases are just round, and it leaves this big round leaf. So that's rounded, shaped leaf scars. And around the bud, there's a bud. The leaf scars sometimes can encircle wholly or partially certain buds. In the summertime, or I should say